2 weeks, culmination of watching 13 of our servicemen and women give their life. 18 who are seriously wounded, dozens of innocent civilians dead. Yesterday we saw the solemn scene of their bodies being returned. Today I got a phone call from the Secretary of Defense saying the military is completely out of Afghanistan. Many of you have been working to get Americans out. There are still hundreds of Americans left in Afghanistan. Even before coming down here, I got a text coming from a pregnant American woman who'd been beaten with her children. She's back into her apartment. College kids trying to get out. To a mother with children, State Department told to go to the airport, not being able to. The decision by this administration to leave Americans there. My question to the Secretary was, what is the plan? What is the plan now to get Americans out? We'd asked Speaker Pelosi to bring us back in session. We are a co-equal branch. We have a responsibility of oversight. We have a responsibility of the thousands of constituents we represent for their voice to be heard. And this room consists mainly of veterans, those who have served their nation. And to everyone who has served, I want to thank you for coming to the call and doing what was asked of you. To the Gold Star families, you will always be in our prayers. They will not have died in vain. Congressman Gallagher has a bill we tried to bring up on the floor last week that you wouldn't set a political decided date. When that occurs, it's designed to have fatal national security consequences. That's exactly what we watched happen. What we need is a date to be determined once every American has left Afghanistan. That was voted down. Congressman Gallagher has updated his bill. Tomorrow is pro forma. We'll ask for it to be heard for passed unanimously. For the administration to tell us what weaponry was left, what's the plan to get Americans home safely, so everyone could know and we could work towards that. Here we have a number of members who served as veterans in Afghanistan themselves. I want to first turn to Michael Waltz.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your leadership in pulling us together to try to deal with this crisis. I want to thank also so many congressional offices, so many of you, Republican and Democrat, where congressional offices, members of Congress and their staffs have had to step up and step in with so many other veterans groups to try to save Americans and to try to save our allies. And frankly, have had to fill the void of this administration's leadership. Just this morning, I personally was on the line with 2 American citizens and their children outside the gate of Kabul International and had to give them the heartbreaking news that I understood it to be closed. We're now trying to smuggle them out through other means, and that is happening organically from veterans, from Republican and Democrat offices, from nonprofits. Basically everybody but this administration is getting Americans and our allies out. So where do we go from now? I think you're already seeing the State Department and the White House try to set the stage that there's good terrorists and bad terrorists, that the Taliban have moderated, that we can trust them to get the rest of our citizens out and to not harm our allies. Well, let me ask you this. There is a Navy veteran, Mark Frericks, that's been held hostage for the last year and a half. So is he free to go? What we have just handed the Taliban and these terrorist groups is a mountain of leverage on a silver platter. Every time they want money, every time they want recognition, every time they want economic assistance or access to billions in foreign reserves, they can walk down the street and take another hostage. We have to remember, too, that this same thinking, appeasing terrorists, concession after concession after concession, the same team that's around Biden was around Obama. that did Benghazi, that did the Bergdahl trade, that recklessly pulled us out of Iraq, that led to the ISIS caliphate and attacks around the world, including inspired attacks here in the homeland, that led to the Iran deal. And they're exercising that same playbook. You cannot appease terrorists. They understand strength, and they understand leverage, and they understand military might. And we're showing none of that right now. A Middle East ambassador just reached out to me and said the word across the region is that jihad is won and democracy is lost. That's shameful. And that is going to make America less safe and get future American soldiers killed that have to go back to deal with this mess. You know, if this administration isn't going to lead, then Congress will, and our veterans community will. We are going to step up, but it is absolutely shameful that future American blood, allied blood, and soldiers' blood are going to be on this administration's hands for this mess that they've created, this self-imposed disaster. Thank you, Leader, and I yield.
I'd like to turn now to Afghan veteran Jim Banks.
I, too, want to thank the leader. The leader is doing what the Speaker of the House is not doing. The leader brought all of us together today to talk about these critical issues and what we can do about it. On the eve of the NDAA markup in 2 days, the leader of the minority party is doing the job that the Speaker of the House is not doing and bringing members together to talk about ways that we can help our Afghan allies and ways that we can get every American out of Afghanistan from behind enemy lines. And I want to commend the leader for that type of leadership. When I served in Afghanistan as a Navy logistics officer, I was on the front lines of the process of turning over American equipment to the Afghan army and the Afghan police to fight against the Taliban. Never would I have believed then, or up until this point where we are today, that not just a little bit, not just some, but all of the $85 billion worth of American equipment that we turned over to the Afghan police and the Afghan army would fall in the hands of our enemy. That's where we are at this point because of the negligence, the hasty and incompetent withdrawal led by this commander-in-chief. All of the $85 billion worth of equipment has been left behind and fallen into the hands of the Taliban without any plan. There was never a plan by this administration or the Pentagon to destroy or evacuate any of that equipment, knowing what we now know is that they knew, this administration knew, that the situation on the ground would deteriorate and the Taliban would take over the country. They knew it, and they lied to us. This president and his leadership lied to the American people because they knew it. They knew the Taliban would take over if they made the move, the hasty withdrawal and the move that they made, leaving $85 billion of equipment, vehicles, weapons and ammunition, night vision goggles, medical supplies, biometric devices and data of our allies, all of it falling into the hands of the Taliban. But it gets worse than the Taliban. This administration has known from day one when they took over, and the Pentagon leadership has known for years that the Taliban is one thing, but the far greater threat is ISIS-K. They've been warning us about it. They've warned us about it before the House Armed Services Committee. Many of us have taken CODELs to Afghanistan over the last couple of years with General Scotty Miller, who was the most recent commander on the ground who led this withdrawal. Representative Bouchon and I were with him 2.5 years ago. And General Miller told us then what we now have seen occur, that if we pull out just like we did, ISIS-K would be the greater threat, the more significant threat to the lives of the American people and an imminent threat to the homeland. And that's the situation that this administration has allowed to happen. It's unforgivable, and we're going to continue to fight like hell to get every American out of the country, but also to hold those accountable for what they've created, the mess that they've created in this country. So with that, I yield back.
Let me turn to former Navy SEAL and veteran of Afghanistan as well, Dan Crenshaw.
And thank you, Mr. Leader, for pulling us together and showing that we take this problem seriously. You know, I actually took the train down today from New York City. I was in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan, at the where the World Trade Center is, with some firefighters who were there that day. We'd been planning this for a long time in preparation for the 20th anniversary. And it's important that people understand what guys like him, what Gold Star families, what veterans feel from all this. There's no elation that the quote-unquote war has ended. The war has not ended. They know, and especially Gold Star families. I had a meeting with a bunch of Gold Star families from the SEAL teams last week. And the goal of that meeting was to kind of see where everybody's at. How are you guys feeling? And it turned out there was no existential questions about whether their son or their husband had died in vain. That was the worry, that people feel like our sacrifices were made in vain. But nobody actually had that opinion. Everybody knew, no. What did we get for 20 years? Well, we got no more 9/11s. We got no attacks on the homeland from this threat that caused 9/11 in 2001. And it's worth noting, we were not at war on September 10th, 2001. We weren't at war when the USS Cole was bombed in 2000. We weren't at war in 1998 when our embassies were bombed. We weren't at war in 1993 when the World Trade Center was bombed. But somebody was at war with us. We were just pretending like they weren't. And after September 11th, we stopped pretending. And unfortunately, today, we began pretending again. We began pretending like we ended a war. And I hope nobody's writing a headline that says, we ended America's longest war. We ended no wars. We didn't lose a war, we didn't end a war, but we did give up a strategic position in that war, in that fight. It will now be extremely difficult to deter or deny terrorist safe havens. We just can't do it. We don't have airfields nearby. We don't have the resources. Taliban will most likely close off cellular networks and internet, making it impossible to target. We don't have eyes and ears on the ground anymore. And the homeland is now at more risk than it has been in 20 years. And don't take my word for it. You can take the intel community's word for it. And I think what's more frustrating even is what Jim had alluded to. The intel community told this administration this would happen. Whether it was 2 days or 2 months or 6 months, they said, it will fall to the Taliban. So knowing this, why keep going with a terrible plan? Why keep going with a plan that has no evacuation plan, no plan for the equipment left behind? Why on earth would they do that? Because they love the slogan, no more endless wars. That's why. We made foreign policy based on an emotional slogan. And it has made America less safe, not more safe. And then they dare to blame the military for it. They say, well, you know, the generals said we can't keep Bagram. We don't need it. The generals said we can't keep Kabul secure. We don't need to. That's not the full story. See, the DOD is given a mission, and that mission was get our troops down to 0 and keep some security on the embassy. That was their mission. Now, if they had been given the option of 2,500 more troops, they could have kept Bagram. See, that was actually the suggestion of the Department of Defense. So do not let this administration lie to the American people and say that the DOD suggested that we leave Bagram, that we leave Kabul. It's just not true. The DOD was put in a position where they had to make that choice. And that should be on the record. And as we find out who is culpable for this complete disaster, I think those are some of the avenues that we'll be going down. Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Thank you, Dan. And now let's go to veteran Mark Green.
Thank you, Mr. Leader, and thank you for bringing this group together. I want to thank my colleagues who served their country, not only here, but wearing a uniform and taking the same oath many years ago. The Taliban broke the agreement that it made with this country from the very beginning. And clearly this year, at multiple points in the timeline, the Taliban continued to break that agreement. Whether it was the power-sharing agreement overall, by their taking over the country, or the agreement to allow Americans to pass through checkpoints. I cannot tell you how many calls have come to my office, and every member seated at the table today calls to their office of Americans who are saying, I can't get through the checkpoint. The Taliban won't let us through the checkpoint. And yet our president did nothing. The military said when we called them, hey, are you capable of going out there and taking a checkpoint and making sure that Americans can get through? Yes, we have the capability to do that. Has the president authorized you to do that? No. And yet here they are contemplating, recognizing the Taliban as a government, as a state. Let the insanity of that sink in for just a second. I'm reminded, and I don't want to be redundant, my colleagues have done a fantastic job sharing their thoughts, and I agree with everything they've said. I just want to bring us back to the War of 1812. Not very far from here, the British were coming up the Potomac River to burn Washington, D.C. And an American yelled out to the British leader who was, I believe it was an admiral who was bringing the force up the river, and he said, if George Washington were still alive, you wouldn't get this far up the river. The British leader said, if George Washington were still alive, we wouldn't have even tried. Why has the Taliban broken agreement after agreement with this president? Because there's no leadership in Washington, D.C., in the White House right now. There's no leadership in the White House right now. And they're not burning down the White House, but they've certainly burned down the reputation of this great country with their failure to lead. And all of that, 100%, is on Joe Biden. I yield.
Thank you, sir. This decision won't last just 7 days, it'll be decades. It has ramifications beyond just Afghanistan. We watch what China's now saying in Taiwan, what Russia says to the Baltics or Eastern Europe, or even the impression that our allies have, do they need a better relationship with China and others? But the heart of the worst part of what we have found is that never in my life did I ever believe an American administration would make a decision to leave Americans behind. Our own government told us just a few weeks ago there's probably 11,000 to 15,000 Americans there. Today they told us they've gotten 5,400 out. All of us have had emails, phone calls of Americans trying to get out for days. Frustration, the work, and being left there. I want to turn to one of our veterans that served in Afghanistan, sacrificed a great deal, Mr. Brian Mass.
Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, it doesn't matter what name they go by. We shouldn't even call them dogs, because it's an insult to the animals that we all love. That's the truth. They're swine. They exist for one reason, and that's to be slaughtered. That's the only reason those terrorists are around, because we haven't killed them yet. That has to be the commitment. The same commitment of those that are laying under flag-draped caskets right now. Their commitment is what we owe this situation in the world right now. There is a line beyond which they will not go, our enemies. There is a line beyond which they will not cross. That was the commitment of those that towed the line at the airport. And every one of our brothers that towed the line in some other place in Afghanistan to say, you will go no further. Your reign stops here. Your tyranny stops here. If we are still America, if we're still the America that every one of the lions in this room loves, fought for, represents, that you all love to cover because it's a place worth covering, then that has to be the next step. The commitment of those that are laying under those caskets as we speak.
I can go to veteran Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Leader McCarthy. Last week I actually had a moment of hope because we had a briefing with the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, high-level officials in the Biden administration behind closed doors. And in that briefing, a lot of our Democratic colleagues actually pushed back quite forcefully on the August 31st withdrawal date, pleading in some cases with the administration not to adhere to an arbitrary date and abandon hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans, leaving them behind enemy lines, leaving them with the threat of being taken hostage. And then a couple hours later on the House floor, when given an opportunity to turn that sentiment into legislative action, our Democratic colleagues did nothing. They voted against a common sense bill that would have required the administration to report on the number of Americans left in country, the number of Afghan allies seeking refuge, and to abandon the arbitrary withdrawal date until every American got out of the country. And they did that because they didn't want to jeopardize the Bernie Sanders budget that we voted on last week. Well, now here we are with another opportunity to do the right thing. And hopefully our Democratic colleagues will join us in this effort. We're going to reintroduce this bill that starts with a simple sense of Congress that Americans do not leave American citizens behind in Afghanistan, trapped behind enemy lines. It also requires an evacuation plan from the administration and clear reporting on the numbers of Americans that are left there, the number of their family members that are there. Congress needs to know the state of play on the ground in Afghanistan. It has an IG report of any agreements with the Taliban, and then it requires a report on the status of any equipment and classified material that we abandon in Afghanistan. And then critically, it has a prohibition on the funding, either indirect or direct, to the Taliban going forward, as well as a sense of Congress, as my colleague, Mr. Green, mentioned, that there should be no recognition, no formal recognition of the Taliban. We believe this is a common sense bill that should command widespread bipartisan support. And we believe it is all the more important because if you watch what this administration is saying right now, in fact, yesterday, I turned on the Sunday shows and I saw our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, go on TV, and when asked about what's the plan for Americans, getting Americans and our allies out after August 31st, he said, well, we believe we have substantial leverage. Because the Taliban wants recognition. We believe we have substantial leverage. What fantasy world model UN conference is this administration living in? The Taliban doesn't want an invite to Davos. And we surrendered our leverage to a jihadist terrorist organization on the ground. Leverage comes from power on the ground, not from a sternly worded statement referencing the international community. It is time for Congress to step up, and it is time for the Speaker to bring us back into session in order to pass this common sense bill. And shame on us if we sit on the sidelines and do nothing as Americans are trapped behind enemy lines.
We watched our president tell us that he would do nothing different. We heard him say that he's planned for every single scenario. Nowhere would I think the American government would plan to leave hundreds of thousands of Americans behind. What is the plan to get them out? It is very simple. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't a Republican, Democrat, Green Party. Tomorrow on the floor, there'll be an opportunity. I've heard Democrats say they're frustrated with this president. This is your moment. This is your time to put America before politics. It's very simple. Sense of Congress. What is the administration's plan now that they made a decision to leave Americans behind to get them home? Give us a briefing on what weaponry did we leave behind. The reports are that Taliban now has more Black Hawk helicopters than Australia. Do not recognize the Taliban. Let's be very clear. ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban are all just fruit from the exact same tree. And no wad of cash delivered to the Taliban. I think that's what America expects from their elected officials. I think that's what America expects from this administration. That's simply what we're asking that's going to come to the floor tomorrow. The question will be, for those Democratic members, are they going to stand behind the action of the decision to leave Americans behind? Because we will not. We will not leave them behind. And we need a plan to get them out and we need to have that voice tomorrow. With that, let's open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Eventually, would you possibly bring impeachment charges against the president?
Look, right now you've got Americans sitting that were told to go to the airport. They're wondering, what are they supposed to do? Our only focus should be on that. As we continue to gather information, we learned just this weekend in a Washington Post article, I could not imagine that I'd ever think a government would say this, that the Taliban said they would stay out of Kabul. But someone in our government said no, that we only need the airport. We have 13 new Gold Star families. We have Americans left behind because of that decision. The idea that the president said no to the military so we could keep Bagram. Had you kept Bagram, you had not just had 2 runways, you had a prison of 5,000 terrorists with ISIS-K inside there that were released. Did they have anything to do with that bombing at that gate? Did they have anything to do with the missiles coming in? We don't know from our own Department of Defense who are those individuals of the terrorists they said they killed. Were those individuals in that prison? Why don't we know the names of them? In my opinion, we have a whole administration. And if you look at this administration, many of them have worked before. They worked in a past administration that gave us Syria. It could be giving us one more Syria problem that we have now. Yes, ma'am. No, we have, we'll have Brian Mast's bill for a discharge petition. No, we'll go out across the country to build support. I will go to the Nixon Library to have a discussion with Robert O'Brien. Robert O'Brien served in a couple administrations. He was in charge of bringing hostages back. He's advising the past administration as well. We need more people to know what's going on. We need to go fan out across this nation and have more people join with us. So anyone's listening or watching now, we don't care of your party affiliation. We don't care if you dislike what we stand for. But I know you stand for America, and I know you stand with bringing these Americans home. Let's have a plan to do that. Let's take politics out of it.
Kevin, can I comment?
Yes, please.
Here's what you're really asking. You know that it's so likely that Speaker Pelosi tomorrow, as we sit here on the eve of having that debate, or asking for a debate on that, asking to say a word about Afghanistan, that she will step up to that podium, bang her gavel, and say, I will not recognize you. I will not hear a word about Afghanistan. I do not want to listen to what's going on there. I do not want to pay attention to it. I do not want to conduct oversight about it. You know that it's that likely that that's what she will do, and that's why you're asking that question. That's the reality of the situation. That's where blood is on somebody's hands.
The question will be, will Speaker Pelosi be willing to go and bang the gavel herself and to deny us? Or who will she select as the Democrat? And why would that person do it? Why would they deny the ability to have a plan to bring Americans home? Yes. No. We're going to use every legislative possibility to make this case. But I would turn it over to Ranking Member Rogers.
Yeah, I'll just give you a flavor of some of the amendments. Right now, we have over 50 amendments filed by Republican members that are running Afghanistan. We want to find out what happened to the equipment that was left behind, what was left behind. We want to know why specifically Bagram was abandoned. I know what it is, but we want to see it in record that it was the administration that decided we were going to reduce down to 600 troops. And we had the mission given by the State Department to protect the embassy and the Kabul airport. You can't do both air bases with 600 people. So the president and his State Department drove that decision, not the military. We created a $250 million counterterrorism fund. We want to know what the security impacts are for letting the ISIS-K terrorists out. We go we forced the department to brief us on a regular basis on the groups that will form because of this withdrawal. There's a whole series of them. Literally 50 right now, and it's still 2 days away. There's going to be a vigorous debate in the NDAA. And here's what I would challenge all of you to do. This NDAA is going to pass out probably Thursday morning with bipartisan support, with a significant $25 billion increase over and above what the president asked for, over inflation, which is a great, healthy spending amount. It's scheduled by the Democrats to go to the floor on August 20th. I dare her to, September 20th, I dare her to bump this for the socialist spending programs that she's wanting to busy September with. We need to be debating this bill in September, not her infrastructure bill. Have no idea. We'll find out on Wednesday.
You know, there are other countries that had their citizens there, and they called their legislative bodies back. The UK called the Parliament. We were called back last week, but only to pass almost $5 trillion, not one of it going to help any American getting out of Afghanistan. This is a moment in time that I think the world will be watching tomorrow in Congress. Will they bring up Gallagher's bill? Yes. Look, we reach out to everyone. I've listened to many Democrats. We've been in briefings. And there are veterans on both sides of the aisle. Not one of them is happy with what they've watched this administration do. I've watched Democrats that are veterans, that are members of Congress, question this administration as hard as we have, because of the lies that they've been told at the same time. That the people that they served with there, that are being left behind. I know what's in their hearts. The question will be, what's in their will? Will they defy the Speaker to stand up for the Americans who are left behind? I've watched him in a closed, classified session say the things they would say. I applauded him. I cheered him. I asked for more time so more Democrats could talk. But the Democratic leadership wouldn't allow it and banged the gavel down. I know, given an opportunity to vote, it would overwhelmingly pass. Without a doubt, yes.
You know, I would say I'm in agreement with what we are trying to do here, which is pushing this administration for accountabilities, making sure that we are not forgetting the folks who are on that ground, the American citizens that were left behind, our loyal Afghan allies who are still there. It is hard for me to compose how I feel right now because this has been such a crushing blow to those of us who believed in what we were trying to do overseas. The position that we put the men and women on the ground at Hamid Karzai International Airport is disgraceful. It's an embarrassment to this country. They were put in that impossible position. I changed my mind because of the impossible position they were in that left them no choice, but they should have never been in there for the first place. The leadership failures are legion within this administration, and we are here to press for accountability and to make sure this never happens again.
Remember, this decision was decided purely for a political date designed for a photo op. When that is the case, you're going to have casualties on a national stage. And that's what we just watched. There is a moment in time that had this president listened to his military, there'd still be the terrorist prisoners inside Bagram. We'd be getting every single American out. The military would not have left before the Americans. It would be a different scenario. And for a president who thinks they would do no different, he's wrong. Every crisis he has faced so far in this administration, he has failed. We don't want him to fail at this one, because if he does, Americans will die.
Mr. Leader, if I could answer the question that
Yes.
should have been asked, if you don't mind. Since they have left, the last aircraft was taken off, we're really not asking the question any longer about the 31st because on 30th they were gone. What we're really asking, and I'd love it if you'd ask that question, is do all of us support the principle that the United States has had for 240 years of not a millions for defense, not a penny for tribute. We want our people out without paying tribute. Do we all support whatever means it takes to get our Americans out without paying tribute? Ask that question and see what answer you get.
It's very simple, the bill. What is the plan to bring Americans home? Thank you, and we hope you're there tomorrow, and we hope this bill passes.